A verse-by-verse study in the Book of Revelation, ESV, with Irv Risch, Chapter 10. What does Revelation chapter 10 mean? This chapter is brief, introducing an interlude between the sixth and seventh trumpet judgments. The interlude consists of two main events. Here in chapter 10, John sees a mighty angel and is instructed to symbolically eat a little scroll. At the beginning of chapter 11, John is tasked with measuring parts of the temple and provided with further end-times prophecies. This chapter begins by describing a mighty angel. He holds in his hand a little scroll, distinct from the scroll of God's judgment described in chapter 5. Based on this passage, some interpreters believe the mighty angel is actually Jesus Christ. Others suggest the mighty angel is the archangel Michael. In either case, this being calls out and the result is the sound of 7 thunders, Revelation 10 verses 1-3. What follows is a rare instance where God explicitly instructs someone, John, in this case, not to reveal what he has seen and heard. Whatever message was contained in the voice of the 7 thunders, that information is not to be included in John's writing. This is an important reminder, that God alone knows everything which is occurring. We are not meant to know all things, and we cannot claim to know all things, either about the end times, or any other subject, Revelation 10 verse 4. This passage also reminds us that God, in the present day, is restraining the influence of evil, 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 7, and holding back on judgment, Revelation 7 verses 1-3. He exhibits patience for the sake of our salvation, 2 Peter 3 verse 9. At some point during the end times, however, God will no longer hold back. There will be no more delay, and the catastrophes of the Great Tribulation will happen according to their own natural timeline. God's merciful restriction of evil, and loving hindrance of judgment, will end, Revelation 10 verses 5-7. John is then given a highly symbolic order, to eat the small scroll being held by the mighty angel. This echoes a similar instruction given to the prophet Ezekiel, Ezekiel 2:3. The initial acceptance of God's word is sweet, knowing it is communication from God. And the ultimate message is one of reconciliation and peace. However, mankind's process of reaching that peace involves judgment, mayhem, and death. This is the bitterness of preaching a sweet gospel to the world, knowing that those who reject God will face his terrible wrath. As part of that bitter obligation, John is required to continue to deliver prophecy about many different things, Revelation 10 verses 8-11. Chapter context: the 10th chapter of Revelation provides an interlude between the 6th and 7th trumpet judgments. Chapter 9 described the 5th and 6th trumpet judgments, which were somehow even worse than the first 4, as described in chapter 8. Here the Apostle John reports that he saw a mighty angel descend from heaven and place his right foot on the sea and his left foot on land. He predicted that in the days of the 7th trumpet judgment the mystery of God would be fulfilled. God will soon complete his program for Israel and the Gentiles. In the remaining chapters of Revelation, we see how God deals with apostate Israel, Jewish believers, and the unbelieving Gentiles. This chapter is related to Isaiah 42, Jeremiah 33, and Daniel 2 verses 31-45. Verse by verse. Verse 1. Then I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven, wrapped in a cloud, with a rainbow over his head, and his face was like the sun, and his legs like pillars of fire. Scripture does not specifically identify the mighty angel described in this verse. Some think it is Michael the archangel, while others believe it is Christ. Several passages in the Old Testament present Christ as the angel of the Lord, Genesis 16 verses 7 and 13, 31 verses 11-13, Judges 6 verse 22. Of course, Christ is not a literal angel but the creator of angels, Colossians 1 verse 15. However, the Greek word translated angel can mean messenger, and Jesus certainly fills that role. He came to earth to bring us God's message of salvation, and he delivered the message of revelation to the Apostle John, Revelation 1. Further, the description of the mighty angel in Revelation 10 verse 1 matches the description of Christ in Revelation 1 verses 15 to 16. The mighty angel descends from heaven, wrapped in a cloud, 10:1, and Revelation 1 verse 7 associates Christ with clouds. Revelation 4 verse 3 mentions a rainbow around God's throne, and Revelation 5 verse 6 says Christ stands in the midst of the throne. Context summary: Revelation 10 verses 1 to 7 involves a vision John sees between his visions of the sixth and seventh trumpet judgments. John observes a mighty angel descending from heaven with a little scroll in his hand. The description of the angel and the reference to a little scroll remind us of what John saw in chapter 5. In that chapter, Jesus took the seven-sealed scroll from the hand of God. In chapter 10, the mighty angel calls upon the seven thunders, but God forbids John to write the thunder's response. However, the angel tells John that what the prophets predicted will be fulfilled when the seventh angel blows his trumpet. Verse 2. He had a little scroll open in his hand. And he set his right foot on the sea, and his left foot on the land. Though the Bible does not give an exact identification, this verse adds further support to the belief that the mighty angel described in verse 1 is Jesus Christ. In chapter 5, Jesus, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, prevails to open the seven-sealed scroll, Revelation 5 verses 5 to 7. Here, this mighty angel holds a little scroll open in his hand. This scroll appears to be different from the scroll of chapter 5. The word for scroll here is BibleRef, whereas the scroll in chapter 5 is Biblion. Perhaps the little scroll contains the mighty angel's orders for what he is to do. The mighty angel plants his feet on the sea and on the land. This action suggests he has full authority over the sea, probably the Mediterranean Sea, and the land, probably Israel. This action also suggests that he claims both the sea and the land as his possessions, or at least that they are under his control. Interestingly, the seal and trumpet judgments that Jesus initiates seem to target the Mediterranean region and the land of Israel. In contrast, the future bowl judgments explicitly are said to affect the entire earth. In the tribulation, two beasts, evil men, hold diabolical control over, possibly headquartered in these regions, Revelation 13, but when Jesus returns to earth he judges these beasts and takes possession of the entire earth. Then he rules as king over all the earth, Psalm 47 verse 2. Verse 3. And called out with a loud voice, like a lion roaring. When he called out, the seven thunders sounded. Prior verses revealed a mighty angel straddling the border between the land and the sea. This verse reports that the mighty angel calls out with a loud voice. His voice sounds like a lion roaring. This comparison is another reason some commentators think this being is Christ. Revelation 5 verse 5 identifies Jesus as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Isaiah 42 verse 13 says that, "The Lord goes out like a mighty man, like a man of war he stirs up his zeal, he cries out, he shouts aloud, he shows himself mighty against his foes." This verse also describes seven thunders sounding when the mighty angel called out. We cannot positively identify the seven thunders, although they may be the same thunders that sounded at the end of the seal judgments, Revelation 8 verse 5. Speculation here is unnecessary. The following verse indicates that the meaning of this event has been explicitly kept unrevealed. All we need to know about the seven thunders is the fact that they affirm the mighty angel's actions. The number 7 appears frequently in Revelation. There are 7 lampstands, 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 thunders, and 7 bowls. 7 is often portrayed as the number of perfection and of God. This contrasts with 6, the number of man and of imperfection. Verse 4. And when the 7 thunders had sounded, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven saying, Seal up what the 7 thunders have said, and do not write it down. The mighty angel of this passage spoke, resulting in a response from what John described as 7 thunders. This verse reports that when John was about to write what the 7 thunders said, a voice from heaven told him not to write it. John obeyed the command from heaven, therefore the book of Revelation does not include what the 7 thunders said. This omission is a strong argument for verbal inspiration, that is, God breathed out the words of the Bible. 2 Timothy 3 verse 16 teaches us, all Scripture is breathed out by God. The doctrine of verbal inspiration assures us that God included everything in His Word, the Bible, that He wanted included and left everything out that He did not want to include in the Bible. In Revelation 10 verse 4 we have evidence of His leaving out what He did not want to include in the book of Revelation. Apparently, what the 7 thunders uttered would not have been profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness, 2 Timothy 3 verse 16. This deliberate omission also reminds us of an important fact: mankind does not know everything. Behind the scenes, in ways we cannot imagine or understand, God is acting and working. This verse is a perfect example of this concept in action. God tells us what He wants us to know, and what we need to know. Just because we do not see, or do not understand, does not mean something is not happening. Verse 5. And the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land raised his right hand to heaven. In this verse John reports that he saw the mighty angel, whose feet rested on the sea and the land, raise his right hand to heaven. Holding the open scroll in one hand, the mighty angel raised his right hand to heaven in preparation for an oath. This gesture commonly preceded a solemn oath in Scripture. When Abraham refused a reward from the king of Sodom, he said, I have lifted my hand to the Lord, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take a thread or a sandal strap or anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich. Genesis 14 verses 22 to 23. In the Song of Moses, Moses declared, I lift up my hand to heaven and swear, Deuteronomy 32 verse 40. In Daniel 12 verse 7 we read Daniel's declaration, I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream, he raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and half a time, and that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end all these things would be finished. Verse 6. And swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and what is in it, the earth and what is in it, and the sea and what is in it, that there would be no more delay. The mighty angel who John saw descend from heaven swore an oath by God that there would be no delay. The Greek phrase here is chronos oukidi estai. Translations such as the KJV phrase this as, there should be time no longer, which is woodenly literal but extremely misleading when read in plain English. The point of this statement is that God's merciful work of restraining evil, holding back catastrophe, or delaying judgment for sin is now at an end. From this point forward, all things in the end times will occur at their natural pace, so to speak. God will no longer intervene to stave off the inevitable. The angel's announcement that there will be no delay also shows us the book of Revelation does not follow a strict chronological order. No further delay occurs at the end of the tribulation, but Revelation doesn't proceed in a direct, linear fashion between chapters 10 and 22, as God fulfills His plan. The mighty angel has addressed God as eternal. He has named God the creator of heaven and earth and all that is in both places. As the creator of everything, God has the right to fulfill His purpose for history and man's role in history. No one can thwart that purpose. Although God is patiently offering salvation to human beings today, 2 Peter 3 verse 9, someday His offer will expire. Death marks the end of a person's opportunity to accept Christ, Hebrews 9 verse 27. God advises humans, therefore, not to boast of tomorrow for no one knows what tomorrow will bring, Proverbs 27 verse 1. Hebrews 3 verse 15 instructs, today, if you hear His voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. Further, 2 Corinthians 6 verse 2 states, "Behold, now is the favorable time, behold, now is the day of salvation." Verse 7. "But that in the days of the trumpet call to be sounded by the seventh angel, the mystery of God would be fulfilled, just as he announced to his servants the prophets." The prior verse makes an ominous claim: there will be no more delay. Scripture speaks of God restraining evil, 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 7, or waiting, 2 Peter 3 verse 9. At some point in the end times, it seems, God will entirely remove his restraints. Events from that point forward will progress at their natural pace, without being slowed or curbed by God. This verse tells us God's mystery will be fulfilled in the days of the sounding of the seventh trumpet. God's timing is always correct. He will bring everything to his appointed conclusion during the days of the seventh trumpet. He will fulfill the Old Testament prophecies about Jesus' second coming and the establishment of his kingdom. Until then, Satan and his followers will oppose God and his people. They will employ the services of sinners to spread wickedness and to deceive many. 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 7 tells us, the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Lawlessness will reach its peak in the tribulation when the man of lawlessness is revealed, 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 3. But when Jesus returns to earth in a blaze of glory, he will cast the lawless one, referred to in Revelation as the beast, and his accomplice, the false prophet, into the lake of fire and bind Satan in the bottomless pit for 1,000 years before casting him into the lake of fire. Revelation 19:20-20:10. Verse 8. Then the voice that I had heard from heaven spoke to me again, saying, Go, take the scroll that is open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and on the land. According to this verse, the Apostle John heard the voice from heaven again. Apparently, this was God's voice commanding him to go and take the open scroll from the mighty angel who was standing on the sea and the land. In Revelation chapter 5 we learned that no one in heaven or on earth was found worthy to open the scroll of God's judgment or even to look into it. However, Jesus Christ was able to take the seven-sealed scroll from God's hand, because he is the only one who took the punishment for the sins of mankind without having any sins of his own. This scroll, however, is not the same one as was seen in chapter 5. The word for scroll used to describe this object in verse 2 was biblaridion, whereas the scroll in chapter 5 was called a biblion. Here in verse 8, the term biblion is used, without the small designation, but it is clearly the scroll indicated in verse 2, which is clearly something separate from the scroll in Revelation 5. Later verses will again identify this as a little book or little scroll. Many interpreters believe the mighty angel of verses 1 through 7 is Jesus. If so, John could draw near to him because Jesus is the approachable mediator between God and man. 1 Timothy 2 verse 5 says, For there is one God, and there is one mediator between God and men, the man Christ Jesus. Jesus has never turned away anyone who came to him in simple faith, John 6 verse 37. Context summary: Revelation 10 verses 8-11 records that the voice John heard from heaven commanded him to take the scroll from the mighty angel's hand. John obeys the instruction and is told by the mighty angel to eat the scroll. Upon eating the scroll, John finds it is sweet to the taste but bitter to his stomach. John receives word that he must prophesy again about many people and nations and languages and kings. The rest of the book of Revelation unfolds what lies ahead for the Gentiles and the people of Israel. Verse 9. So I went to the angel and told him to give me the little scroll. And he said to me, Take and eat it, it will make your stomach bitter, but in your mouth it will be sweet as honey. John went to the mighty angel and asked for the scroll. Promptly, the mighty angel gave him the scroll and commanded him to eat it. He told John it would make his stomach bitter but it would taste as sweet as honey. It's not controversial to note that this is highly figurative language. John's actions and reactions here are meant to symbolize important spiritual ideas, not merely the idea of eating a piece of paper. In the Old Testament, the prophet Ezekiel received a command to deliver God's message to rebellious Israel, Ezekiel 2 verses 3-4. Upon receiving this command, Ezekiel saw a hand stretched out to him, and a scroll was in the hand, Ezekiel 2 verse 9. Eat this scroll, and go, speak to the house of Israel, the Lord said, Ezekiel 3 verse 1. When he ate the scroll, Ezekiel found that it tasted as sweet as honey, Ezekiel 3 verse 3, but later he experienced bitterness, Ezekiel 3 verse 14. God's word contains both a sweet message and a bitter message. The prophet Jeremiah testified, "Your words were found, and I ate them, and your words became to me a joy and the delight of my heart," Jeremiah 15 verse 16. The message of reconciliation and forgiveness is sweet, but the message of condemnation is bitter. The gospel is sweet to those who embrace it, but bitter to those who reject it. John's eating of the scroll, then, carries the same symbolism as it did for Ezekiel. John is taking on the message of God in order to carry it to others. This is a sweet experience at first, but the aftermath brings pain and heartache. Communication with God, especially in such an overt way, would certainly be uplifting. Knowing that the message is one of judgment and destruction, however, is gut-wrenching. Verse 10. And I took the little scroll from the hand of the angel and ate it. It was sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had eaten it my stomach was made bitter. In this verse we learn John took the little scroll from the angel and ate it. Just as the angel had said, the scroll tasted sweet but turned bitter in John's stomach. This description is meant to have a symbolic application to all believers, though that meaning is often missed or misunderstood. Believers are commissioned to proclaim God's word, all of it, but we cannot proclaim what we do not know. We must partake of the word and make it a part of our being. Further, we must not withhold any message from the word because it might be bitter. Even if it offends our audience, we must speak the truth in love, Acts 20 verse 27, Ephesians 4 verse 15. In other words, we are obligated and privileged to share the whole word with the whole world. The little scroll was sweet, likely because it contained a message of hope for Israel. God will vindicate righteous Jews, defeat their foes, and restore the kingdom to Israel. He will refine 1/3 of the nation in the fire of the tribulation. These refined Jews will call on the Lord's name and be reconciled to him, Zechariah 13 verse 9. But the little scroll also contained a bitter message: the destruction of the wicked will be bitter. Verse 11. And I was told, you must again prophesy about many peoples and nations and languages and kings. John was told he must again prophesy about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings. He had digested the prophecy, in the form of the little scroll, and now he must communicate it. His prophecy would focus on the Gentiles and their treatment of Israel, and Israel's response to God's work on her behalf. He would prophesy about God's faithful two witnesses in Revelation 11, about Satan's vicious persecution of Israel in chapter 12, about Satan's two evil henchmen, the beast and the false prophet, in chapter 13, about the faithful 144,000 in chapter 14, about the assembling of armies at Armageddon in chapter 16, about the fall of Babylon in chapters 17 and 18, about Jesus' defeat of the nations in chapter 19, and about the consignment of unbelievers from all periods of history to the lake of fire in chapter 20. The Roman emperor had banished John to isolation on the island of Patmos, but he could not silence his witness. God would use John to write Revelation, the New Testament's book of prophecy, which millions have read. End of chapter 10. Please note: the material use in this video is from BibleRef.com, which is from Got Questions Ministries and is posted here to be read by immersive reader in the Edge browser. If you copy this material, please follow these rules. Content from BibleRef.com may not be used for any commercial purposes, or as part of any commercial work, without explicit prior written consent from Got Questions Ministries. Any use of our material should be properly credited. Please make it clear the content is from BibleRef.com. BibleRef.com content may not be altered, modified, or otherwise changed unless such changes are specifically noted.